Hey, thanks for tuning in to another episode of the CIS podcast. I'm here with my friends Natural State coming to us live from Nashville, Tennessee. And like I was saying before we started, this is the biggest group I think we've had so far. So Natural State wins the award for the most participating members of the CIS podcast. So you guys win.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. We'll take whatever awards we can get.
Yeah. Well,
I'm pretty competitive too, so that works.
You guys can't see it, but I keep a Dundee Award in my studio here because I have to win when I can. So
that's awesome.
I always like to start at the beginning, and like I was saying, we can answer collectively or individually, but go around our Zoom world here. And how'd you guys get started in music? Kind of where did it all begin for you?
I'll start because ladies first, right? I have been singing since I could sing to The Little Mermaid or any Disney movie. When I was about 12, I started writing music, and it was really bad. I mean, really, really. Like Dell knows some of the older stuff. Don't even say the titles because the titles are just horrible. But when I started writing, it was only about the Lord. Like as boy crazy as I was at 12, 13 years old, it was only about Jesus. And so I started writing. My mom kind of saw this gift in me, started kind of fostering this gift and seeking out some producers and people in the area that I could connect with to see where it went. Started kind of producing these terrible songs, sweet moms who believe in us. I would go back and forth from Chattanooga. I grew up in Chattanooga, back and forth from Chattanooga to Nashville pretty often. I was involved with GMA events, and I went to like all the conferences and I was entered into songwriting competitions at an early age. And so from there, just met a lot of people and just discovered this passion that I had for writing and singing about the Lord. And just ever since I can remember, I've just always wanted to be an artist and songwriter. So that's kind of my story in a nutshell.
Well, for me, I grew up in church as well, but I grew up in Baltimore, Maryland. So I was a northern boy with some southern roots. But the church I grew up in was a small town church. And the bass player for the church was actually our Sunday school teacher. So it was me and maybe 6 other boys, 11 or 12 years old. And he was like, hey, raise your hand if you guys want to learn to play guitar. And like everyone raised their hand except for me. And he points at me and he says, well, I'm going to teach you to play bass. So I was like, okay, sounds good.
Token bass player.
Yeah. So I thought it would be this like he gave me my very first bass, which was a Yamaha that he had custom. It was a short scale, but he took all the frets out. And he's like, if you need to learn to play fretless, that way you know exactly where notes are supposed to be. So I was like, I guess this is how everyone learns. But started playing with him like at rehearsals on Sundays and stuff. And then about 2 months into it, he's like, all right, I'm retiring. You're taking over. And I was like, okay. And ever since then, I've been playing bass in church. And as I got older, I felt like music was what I wanted to do. And I went to college. But as a music major for about a semester at Lee University, I was like, I don't want to learn classical music. I was an 18-year-old who thought I was going to be a rock star. So I was like, nah, I'm just going to play music for fun and then figure something else out. So then I got a degree in film, but yet here I am working full time as a music director at a church and playing with Natural State.
That's awesome. Love it. I mean, most people put like extra notation on their necks to understand like where to hit the right. And he took it all from you. So what a good foundation. Be fretless. That's awesome.
Yep. Pastor's kid, grew up in church. And, I remember I was 4 and my uncle played drums. And I just remember standing in the back of this like old, tiny little cinder block church that my dad had started in a tiny town in Alabama called Bexar. And just staring at the drums and having some strange love for them as a 4-year-old. And, as we got a little older, a family in the church brought a drum set and they're like, hey, the church can use these drums if they'll teach our kids how to play. I didn't know how to play, but I was like, okay. So, I started playing when I was about 9 or 10 and my feet wouldn't even touch the pedals. Wednesday nights, it was still, Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night, I'd fall asleep on my snare drum up there in the middle of church, So I just played in church really most of my life and with my family, my mom's family and her side of the family was kind of one of those typical 70s musical families where everyone kind of played something and sang. And so kind of grew up around that. And yeah, played in church my whole life. And when I got older, thought, hey, I really want to do this more, and moved to Nashville. Did what every Nashville musician does. I started waiting tables. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, that's it. I've just always loved it and grew up in church doing it. And it's,
I love that. And I've literally got a church family bringing over some drums for my son this afternoon. So maybe this will be an origin story just like Dell's.
yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's so cool.
Yeah. I'm a little, pray for us though, because he's about to be 8 and he likes to hit stuff and he's going to hit them. So
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
I love that the church can be such a place to foster like gifts like that. I grew up, in the pews, the same situation. I mean, we kind of did like the rock band thing, but still it was like I'd go to church to get math tutoring, and after that we'd start doing band practice. Just the flexibility to get to pour into gifts, because the bar of entry is low, because usually, especially in these towns that aren't in like music towns, there's not as many people doing it. So it's like, hey, you can almost do that. You are the main guy now, or girl.
Right. Right.
Like same thing with you, Matt, like with bass. Like my buddy just played guitar or had guitar lessons. I was like, well, if we want to be in a band, I should learn a different thing. So bass, here we go,
Yeah.
So I totally get that. So how did you guys go from well, two, I do kind of want to go through like what caused you to make the move to actually living in Nashville from your surrounding towns. Like how did you get there? And then, how did you meet? And then kind of go through the origin story of the natural state here.
Yeah. Well, the questions may be like better answered, flipped, actually, like how we kind of became a band and then kind of went full time.
Okay.
So like I said, I was pursuing this solo artist thing as a teenager. And I mean, honestly, from probably 12, 13 years old to 19, 20 years old, I was working at this. Like, and I had dreams of getting signed at a young age and being the next, like, Britt Nicole, not Rachel Lampa, because I don't have all those runs, but just kind of a, rocker teenage chick. And it kind of resulted in this big
like culmination.
That's
There
it,
you
Brian.
go.
Yes, culmination. Ended up doing this label showcase at 18 years old in downtown Nashville with all of these connections I had made over the years. And I just wanted it so bad, but probably not for the right reasons. I did love Jesus. I did want my life to point to him. I wanted to use him to use my story for his glory, for sure. But like, also, I just think he knew that I just struggled with a lot of insecurity and wrestled with just my identity. And so in this industry, especially as a teenager, like there's just a lot of voices. Like I'm not even one that's like bitter towards the industry or anything like that. I knew great people growing up, and they loved the Lord, and they wanted to do the best that they could with what God had given them. And I think that they just saw this in me, that they knew that I just wasn't ready. But just all the voices of who you should be, and then the internal voice of like what you want and all of that. Like I thought with this label showcase, this is the one result that I want. Like I have this one thing that I think it should turn out this way, and if it doesn't, I'm just done. And so that's what happened. It wasn't awful. It actually went well, but it just didn't result in the thing that I wanted. And so I just gave up. I just was like, I'm never going to write a song again. I was just very defeated, very discouraged. Ended up moving back I had moved from Chattanooga to Nashville, and I went to a year at Belmont and ended up dropping out, did a few tours and stuff. And then ended up moving back to Chattanooga, taking a job leading worship. I had never led worship also. That was a thing. Like that's kind of the difference. I didn't grow up singing in church. I grew up kind of singing to tracks and writing. And so I took a job leading worship. And it's almost like God knew that I needed that season too, to lead worship, for him to kind of strip away all of these motives that he knew that I didn't need to go into this with all of, this kind of heart, these motives. And he really just healed me. Like, honestly, I worked at a church in Chattanooga, started in student ministry, said I was never going to write a song again, said I was never going to promote myself again, was never going to be in this industry again or anything that resembled it. And I just watched God himself just open up door after door after door for me. And that had never really been the case. And I honestly, like, this may sound cliche, but I fell in love with his presence, fell in love with his, like, the Holy Spirit power, versus like just a performance, just me getting up and performing. And it was just different. And I loved it, loved leading worship. This is where I meet Dell at this church. He was also working at this church, and he had lived in Nashville too. He had kind of gone back and forth as well. He had lived in Nashville, moved to Chattanooga. He had heard that I had lived in Nashville, and in Chattanooga, that world's kind of small. Like, it's like, so he was like, you lived in Nashville, you did the artist thing. Like, I'm in a CCM band with my brother and his wife, and I want you to hear our stuff. And it's so funny because that was like the first time that I kind of had brushed up against like this old life, like the industry life. And I just was like, he said my face when he like brought it up, like, hey, do you want to hear our stuff? Like, he's all excited. And I was just like, because it was just all these old wounds that I just was like, I don't know if I'm ready to, enter back into that world. And God had put a passion in me at a very early age to write songs and be an artist. I know that kind of sounds, I don't know what that sounds like, but I know that it was there, and it was almost like I had just like buried it and had wanted to run so far from that I wouldn't let God touch that. I was in this other worship world. Like this was my world now. Mm-hmm. And so my husband and my mom had said this whole time, you need to keep writing. You need to keep writing. You have a gift for that. And even if the artist thing doesn't work out, you need to keep writing. And I didn't write a song for 8 years. And Dell and another guy at the church, they were like, let's write just for the congregation. Let's just see what happens. And so I was like, okay, we'll write for the congregation. We won't tell anyone that we wrote these songs though. Cause like, I'm not about that promoting myself life anymore, Mm-hmm. And I remember the first time that we led a song that I had written for the first time in 8 years, watching people respond, and worship the Lord through these lyrics that we had written. It was just a completely different experience than writing before. And so I fell in love with writing again and started writing with Dell. And he was in a band called Landers with his brother and his brother's wife. They were writing a worship record for his brother's church. And they invited me in to kind of like, hey, like, let's collaborate. Let's see what happens. Brian, you're songwriter. Like, sometimes songwriting can be, or co-writing can be really awkward. This situation was supernaturally unawkward. We wrote 4 songs together. I mean, it was like one of the first times I had even met these people. We had even all been in the same room, and it just went very well. So this resulted in us creating Landers Music Co. No one understood, or no one knew ever what the co meant. We were introduced to so many different things. But it stood for collective because we all kind of did different things. We went on tour with Colton Dixon and Manic Drive in 2019 under that name. And the tour was so much fun. I mean, it was like everything we had dreamed of. It was like our little kid, like rocker band hearts were so happy on that tour. And we were supposed to go back out on tour with Colton and Citizen Way in, I think it was going to be April 2020. Obviously that got canceled. I was going to be 8 months pregnant with my second child on that tour. So would have been pretty uncomfortable. But so we ended up, when we got back from that first tour with Colton, Dell's brother and his wife, they own businesses. They have 5 kids, and they just were like, we can't go at this pace. So Dell and I are like, well, what do we do? Like, we can't just be like, just you and me. Like, what are we going to do? We really did pray for like that third person or fourth person. Like, what was it going to be? Who are we even going to be? Like, we're not going to be Landers, because Landers is a road that Dell and his brother had grown up on in Arkansas. And so that didn't really, like, I didn't grow up with them, So we're in this process of rebranding and thinking through different names. And we were playing a show in Arkansas, which is where Dell is from. And we go under the sign that says, "Welcome to Arkansas, the natural state." And we were like, that kind of resonates with our spirits a little bit. Like, we feel like our natural state is to know God, to worship God, to love him, to use our gifts to love others. And that's just who we are. And so we rebranded to Natural State. We had known Matt, I think, a little bit before that, maybe, but yeah, Dell, I'll let you kind of take over.
Yeah. So, my brother and his wife transitioned out. Matt was a very natural person for us to bring into what we were doing. My brother played some acoustic and would play some bass and things like that. My brother was really great with people, hardworking kind of guy. And Matt just kind of like embodied a lot of those same qualities, great with people, plays bass, has tattoos. You can't go wrong there. Right? So
yes, like I really was like, you have to have that tattoo. No, but the people thing was really important to us too, because that is one of the things that people said on that tour with Colton. Like, we haven't really had many bands help like serve us, and that's a passion of ours. Like, we want, wherever we go, whatever venue we are in, whatever people we're around, like, we want to serve them. And, a main way of that is through our music and through the show, but also off stage too. And Matt loves people so much. He's such a joyful, helpful, serving person. And so, sorry.
So it's just a really easy ask of him to be a part of what we were doing. We're all adults and we all have really busy lives, and it's not like Matt didn't have anything else happening in his world, but we thought, hey man, if you would be willing and it's something you want to do, we would love for you to be a part of it. Natural State came to be.
I love it. It's it's in the name, right? It just naturally happened, and and I love what you said, and I've experienced this too, Haley, in a different way, through healing process of doing the thing that you think that you want to do. And I'm speaking more to like the pop solo girl band situation that you were chasing, and you chase after that so much, and you feel like, well, God's calling me to this, so it's going to work, and obviously this is what he said, so I'm going to do it and put everything into it. But like, what we don't realize, and I think what the enemy does, is all of a sudden it becomes like an idol without us realizing it, because we're looking at it under the guise of like, well, God said it, so how could it be bad? But then when you get to that place where it's like, it didn't come the way, they didn't have the 7 contracts in front of you, to sign your life to get the thing or whatever, the goal was. It didn't happen that way. So then you're like pulled back completely, and you're like, oh boy, now what? But then, I don't know, the weird thing is like, it really comes down to surrender. Like, the thing that we feel like God called us to, that doesn't mean it's not it, because it is it, but like, we might have to surrender our idea of it so that he can actually do it in the way that he wants to. And so that theme of going and serving at the local church, which is something you actually hadn't really done. You've done a lot of parts in music and Christian music, but obviously we know worship is different than that. But there's a healing process, but at first you're like, I'm never going to do that again, because the conditioned response is music equals bad times for the inside, so like, you have to go through, because it's going to be difficult and hard, but it still is the surrender of that. Like, okay, God, this is going to kind of probably be like painful at times, but ultimately like the result of that is that the doors begin to fling open, because you're no longer trying to open them yourself. And like you said, that's like a cliche churchy thing, but like when you experience that, it's not a cliche thing at all. It's literally God at work. It's just we're on the correct path now, as opposed to the one that we thought it was going to be. So and I think anybody like listening can be encouraged by that, because it's hard, and it's not, if we're trying to force it, then all we're going to do is keep like literally banging our head against a door that we can't even open.
Absolutely.
And the thing that's funny is like, probably, I don't even say probably, I would say in my experience, definitely the doors that we think that we want to open that we can't, that path is not a good path to be on for us.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It's like God can see it all. Exactly. That is kind of how we ended up doing this full time now and getting back into it. Like we watched God. Same as when I started working at the church. Like when we kind of surrendered the way that we thought it should go, like we did watch doors open up. We did see God just provide for us in ways that obviously like he wanted to. And it doesn't mean that it didn't take work on our part too, because it's definitely a combination. Like that is something that I struggled with too, is like when I led worship at the church, I'm like, oh, if it's meant to be, like this was always in the back of my mind, like someone will just walk in the church one day and then they'll be like, oh my gosh, who's that girl? And they'll want to sign, like, but it's like, no, I found I found my joy and my love for why I wanted to do this, like when I was 12 years old again as an adult. And I realized like, no, I want to put in work towards this. God doesn't necessarily have to bless it in the way that I think it should, but working towards something will find a way to open up the right door. And I think God uses that as well. That's what ended up happening. It's like, so Dell and I, like 2020, 2021, we were driving back and forth to Nashville like a few times a week, like for different rights and meetings and stuff. And like, it started getting busy and we're like, wait, like, I think that it's time to like move, like make the move. And I have a husband and 2 kids, and like it was a big deal to step away from my position at the church. I had been full time at the church for 13 years, so it was big. But like, this is what I tell people: it's like you'll know it's time. And obviously, it doesn't happen like this in every situation. But like there were so many years before that, different people in Nashville, different music people would be like, "You need to move to Nashville. You need to move to," and I would just be like, "No, it's not time. It's not time." And then like all of a sudden when it was time, it was like, I was like, whoa, like there's no denying this. Like I'm ready. There's no fear, like I didn't really struggle with like letting go. Like God just went before us in a lot of those like details. And so Matt is still in Chattanooga. He travels back and forth often. I'm here, Dell's here. And we, so our time, like as far as full time, like this whole last year, we have been writing like crazy. When we first moved here 2 years ago, we were writing like 4 times a week, which, with our schedules, like it was very busy, but it was super fun. Like anytime I would get busy and stressed out, I'd walk out my door and I'd just be like, Haley, no, like this is the life that like you wanted. Just like take a deep breath and look around for a minute. Like this is awesome. Like this is what you've always wanted to do. So I truly am thankful for each day here.
I've had this kind of this thought recently about kind of that, like in our lot, and I don't mean this to sound like morbid. That sounds intense, but basically, like, we live this life and we get all these skills. We spend the time, we get the bass, fretless bass, and we learn how to play it. We sing the songs, we do the thing, we write, we do all that. But then, like, eventually, like, our time on earth is up, and all those skills, they go with us. So, like, I'm saying that because I feel like the result in like how we can make the most of it is literally just enjoy it as we're doing it and not worry as much about where it's going. You know what I mean? So like you said, like when you walk out of your house and you feel like stressed out, like, oh man, I have so many rights today, or, like, oh, I have so many songs I got to produce today. Like, whoa, like let's try and just actually enjoy it. And it's hard because it's stressful and there's a lot of pressures and like overwhelm is like a real thing. It happens. Right. But I feel like, how do we, I'm thinking like James 1, like how do we have joy in everything? It's like we just actually try to enjoy what we're doing, instead of always, awesome. I feel like the fuel comes from actually enjoying it as we're doing it. So I love that you said that. So what is your, the Nashville life look for you guys now that you've been there for a couple of years? I know you're doing tons of writing and stuff. And like, how is it kind of been now that you're actually in town on a regular basis?
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, we seriously, we buckled down on writing. We wanted to get, like, we had released some music in 2021. And, we just realized once we got here, like, and we needed to grow as songwriters. We're like, okay, we get it now. Like, people had kind of said that, and we're like, no, like, we played these songs on tour and people loved them, and so we got to get them out. And they served a purpose, and people are still listening to them, and I'm so thankful for that God is using them in people's lives. But also, like, the songwriting is a craft, so it's like we knew that we wanted to hone this skill and hone this craft, and just still, it's just fun to explore, like, finding your sound and really, like, zeroing in on that. And so that's what we put our head down, and that's what we were doing. But also, we're also in the season now where, like, we're so ready to play live. Like, we are so ready to tour. Like, that is what we love to do. And there would be, like, some one-off gigs, over the last few years that we would do. But, like, I feel like we have this batch of songs now, and it's just like, we're in this place where, like, they need to get out to the world. Mm-hmm. How can we best, most effectively, efficiently do that for the most people to hear them? We're just brainstorming a lot of things. I feel like we are in a position now where writing never stops, but it's like we have this Dropbox full of, I don't know, maybe 100 songs. Like, I'm like, we could make a record. Like, we're just ready to kind of like let's move on. So that's not really an answer to your question of what every day is like, but it definitely in the beginning was a lot of writing. We have meetings with our management team and different people and photo shoots. Like, I'd be like, Nat, it's time for another photo shoot. Here we go. Let's do it. And social media, I mean, that's a very real thing that we are working at right now. And we just hit 10,000 followers last week, which, like, I know that sounds so, I'm learning to try to not downplay that, because it is people, like, and the engagement and the connection that we're seeing people have with our music. Like, I seriously could cry, like, reading the comments. I cry reading people's comments and stories. And because it's like, oh my goodness, this, like, 30-second clip is really impacting people's lives that much. Like, we know that we were in writing rooms where we shed tears over songs, and we had heart to hearts. Like, we poured our heart and souls into these songs, but, like, they're actually connecting with people. And so, yeah, we're just in this place where almost it's like there's a demand. Like, people are, like, angry, like, when is this song coming out? And we're like, okay, we need to start talking about this.
No, I love it. So let's actually talk about that. Like, I mean, I know that you guys are in process here, but, like, what are some ideas? Because I think that's actually what caused me to reach out, because we've been following each other for quite a bit on Instagram, but, like, it was like you posted some new music coming, and I was like, hey, this is perfect time to actually talk about it. So yeah, like, what kind of ideas are you throwing around, and, like, what is your behind social media posts? Like, how much planning are you kind of doing? And, go into as much nerdy detail as you want, because I'm all about the nerdy detail, but, like,
that was the nerd.
Yeah. So how, like, what are some ideas? What are you guys looking to do to get these songs out? Because 100 songs is a ton. People would think, like, well, that's a lifetime of music, but when you boil those 100 down to, like, the best 12 or 10 or whatever you want to do with it, it's like the cream of the crop of the crop. So, like, what is the angle behind these new music to get it out there?
Yeah, so some of it is just what Haley was talking about, where we really just kind of leaned into the social media thing, because she'd mentioned we want to play live. Like, obviously that's weird. We're just rockers. That's what we want to do. We want to play. And so, but one of the challenges in this is not treating it like a hobby, right? But treating it like a business. And with a business, you have to think through maybe different or deeper details than you would if something was just a hobby, right? So as we sat down, and we've been having some conversations with, industry people, management labels, things of that nature, I started just trying to process like what are the hurdles that our business needs to overcome for us to get to the place where we can do this. Like, I don't think any of our hearts are in a place where we care about being like known. We do want to provide, but that's like we want to play music and pay our bills, right? that's the thing we want to do. We want people's lives to be impacted by that, of course. And like, so we started looking into like, what do we do? So we have all these songs on Song Mountain in the Dropbox, and like, how do we take them? Obviously, like you said, you're right, and you know that. Like, you got 100 songs, 90 of them probably aren't awesome, right? So, I mean, I'm not saying they're bad, but they're not maybe your strongest stuff. So,
or how they best align, that batch of songs that works together for where you want to take the music.
right.
You might have your random like reggae or hip hop song that doesn't fit this record. That's the next one, right?
Right. And that's exactly like what I mean in terms of like treating it like a business instead of a hobby. Right. Like, because you could write a cool song, but just because it's cool doesn't necessarily mean it's the right voice for now. Right. So, yeah, the thing we're trying to do is just continue to grow a fan base and an audience. And as you've seen some of this new music we've put out, just watch the way somebody asked me, like, because they were asking too, like what we're doing, like, they're like, are you just kind of throw things out there and see what happens? I said, no, we're not just trying to throw things out there and see what happens. However, as we're trying to create content, because that's from one perspective, that is what we're doing is creating content, right? We're taking the songs we have to create content and connect with people. So as we're creating content, like, yeah, just like you're talking about the songs in that pile that will rise, like it becomes very clear very quickly which songs are landing with people. And if you go, not that the numbers matter, but if you go look at the 2 most viewed videos of the songs we've posted, they couldn't be more different. Like one's very like deep, heartfelt, emotional, slow, piano driven, and one's like rock, and they're very different, but they both are connecting with people, and they are both us too at the same time, right? So as that's happening, like the strategy then is like, okay, I'm kind of just trying to take it a day at a time, a week at a time, a month at a time, just chunks, and go, okay, so if this, then this, right? Meaning in this case, how do I want to grow my fan base? Well, one of the most effective ways currently in our culture, whether you love social media or hate social media, it's social media. That's one of the best ways to grow a business. So that's a strategy we're leaning into. In the process of that, we're watching people engage. Specifically, there's plenty of, like, there's several of the songs people really engage with, but there's a few that have really elevated above the others. And so then the conversation starts to change a little bit. Like, okay, kind of like Haley mentioned, writing never stops. And again, because of social media and what it is and what it does, creating content never stops either. This is a big part of your business and your brand, and you're trying to put that out to the world and market yourself. So as we do that and we see these things rise, then we add to. It's just like a layer like approach where now as these songs start to have success, we start having the conversations of, okay, what does it look like now to begin to release new music in full to people? And again, it wasn't like let's test the waters and see which ones they liked. It really the motivation was content. That was the motivation, was like, let's introduce ourselves to as many people as we can. Let's let people connect with us and hear us and see what we do. And in the process of that, it became clear which songs people were connecting with. So then the conversation starts to become, okay, let's put out full versions of these songs now. And so those conversations are the ones we're in the process of having now. And then, of course, like we've already mentioned, like the next phase would be hopefully as much as possible to play live. It just, without boring people with like the raw numbers of how much money it takes to tour, it's a very expensive thing to do. And that's a great way to grow your fan base. Social media is also a great way to grow your fan base. If finances are something you have to consider, like you have to think through your budget and what you can and can't do and what makes the most sense for where you are, social media is your best bet to at least try to build some momentum on the front end for sure. No, so that's kind of it. Content, release music, tour would be, those are big picture 30, 30,000 foot. Those aren't very granular, but
No, I mean that's I watched an interview yesterday with this guy named Nick D, and he's got like 4 million plus monthly listeners. He literally says he gets 1 million streams per day, and like he's completely independent. But what he said is he writes content and then writes songs for the content as opposed to the reverse, which most people do, because like in 2024, that can break an artist. If you get viral video or whatever that means, I don't even know what the definition of viral is, like million and up, I don't know, but whatever. But like that exposes you to a crazy amount of people from your phone, it's like like, and like you said, you're not testing the market, but you are in a way, just because you want to share what you're doing. But you get to like growing up, like back in the day, music industry, it's like you put all the money into it and then you hope people like it. Now you can actually like tease it and build engaging relationships, like in a way that you never could before. So I know, people like feel weird like making their music a product, but like you said, if you don't do that, then it is a hobby, and that's okay. But like that's just what it is. You know what I mean? So for you guys to actually find the through line of like these two songs couldn't be more different, rocker song and piano ballad, but like then you figure out the other 8 or the other 4, whatever EP or album you're doing, and tie this together, but you drip them out all leading into. Then I mean, it sounds like you probably still have relationships with other artists where, so when you say like touring is expensive, is that like because you're practically like feeding yourself and doing all that? Or like, is it like, I don't actually know like the touring stuff. I've never done that. So like, do you pay to get on tours? Is that a thing? Like, how does that, in your experience, how has that process kind of been as you're kind of looking towards the, like you said, the culmination of this album? There's that word again, culmination. Who knows? Twice in one day. Wow.
Yeah.
There you go. Culmination.
Yeah. So
Never
definitely
forget
there's definitely options of, buy-ons and tours, but even not even necessarily talking about that, which is of course could be an expense as well. But
right.
Just the thought of literally, whether you're driving yourself in a van and pulling a trailer, lodging, food, finances for the people involved, and making sure your people are taken care of, and just the expense of traveling. And for us, there's like, we have this little wrinkle in our band in that we have a female. So because there's a girl, everything's cost twice as much. And like, no offense, Haley, but like, this is a lady. So this lady, Matt and I, we'll figure it out. We'll sleep in the car if we have to, but like, you know what I mean? Like there's a lady, so we can't do that with her. So can't just make her sleep in a car. So, it just becomes a little bit more complicated and costs a little bit more if you like, but I say a little bit more, but if you do that over a daily basis, that number begins to swell pretty quickly. And so the expense, I just mean really just practically the expense of, and you got to think with any kind of a vehicle that's big enough to pull gear, fuel economy's out the window. Or if you think something about, hopping on a tour bus with another band, even the expense of that is not small. That those are all really expensive things to do.
Hey, Matt's gonna have to hop off here in a minute, but I do want to know. This is one of the questions Brian was going to ask. I want to know what he would say to his younger self. Can you ask that question, Brian?
hey, Matt.
Just naturally leading to this part of the conversation.
I know.
So from fretless basses, so would you tell yourself to put the frets back on? What would be the piece of advice you'd give to your younger self?
Some of it's already been said, but definitely to live in the moment, because there's a lot of times that I felt like I had to be further along than I actually was. And in that, I put expectations on myself and allowed other people to then put expectations on me that are like, you're going to do this one day, or you're going to be this. And I had to live in that place, right? Instead of just enjoying, like, God has me on the journey he has me on. And I want to not only have an awareness that he's right there with me along for the ride, but that he has me in a place for a reason. So whether that was playing in church, whether that was being in college and doing the stuff I was doing there, or currently being in ministry full time, like, what are you teaching and growing in me right now? And just live in those moments instead of being like, man, 10 years from now, 5 years from now, like, I think our society kind of pushes us that way of like, where are you going? What's next? How are you growing? And it's like, let me just let these things take root now. And then 10 years from now, I know that I'll look back and be like, God, thank you for teaching me these things in this moment. So I really wish my younger self would have done that better. But, being almost 34 now, I'm glad I'm learning that lesson now and not 30 years from now. So
it's like the stagism thing. I have a friend named Chase who we talked about that at a right one time. It's like we have this constant need to feel like the next thing is the thing that we need to do the thing that we want to do. But often, like, we already have what we need. You guys already have 100 songs, like you're writing to make your craft better, but people would say like, oh, well, I need the 101st song to be able to start to do this stuff, like you guys are starting to put it in place now so that way you can build, because there's always going to be more. There's always going to be the next thing. My joke with my wife is like, if we wait to buy the newest TV, we're never going to buy a TV. So let's just buy one now. And enjoy that until the next, and then tomorrow a better one will come out. But at least we have one to watch. So,
solid reasoning. I love it.
Thanks for sharing.
I love it.
Since we're kind of on that topic, what are some like piece of advice that you guys would give to your younger selves?
Well, Dell is 8 years older than me, and I feel like he does give me like big brother, fatherly advice all the time. So take it away.
I would say for myself, it would just lean into the work. It sounds like too simplistic, but it's lean into the work. And also this is advice I'd give somebody across, I don't care if it's relationships or work out, like just a career, whatever you're trying to do, like unmet expectations can be such a thief of joy. And you start to feel your worth or your value isn't what you wanted it to be if things don't look the way you hoped, right? And I loved what you said earlier when you said, let's put it in God's hands and let him be the one that takes it where it needs to go. Because I know for me, the thing, so to like hone back in on the question, for me, the thing I would tell my younger self is, just put your head down and do the work and be who God made you to be. People always get so stuck on what their purpose or calling is. Like, it's so much simpler than people make it. Scripture says, and I may butcher this, so it won't be verbatim, but he said, I've told you what is good, that you do justly, that you love mercy, and that you walk humbly with God. And then when they asked Jesus, what's the greatest things we can do? He said, to love God with your heart, your soul, your mind, your strength, and to love your neighbors yourself. So those are very clear, easy things for us to know that any of us as believers should be doing. And secondly, what are you passionate about? Scripture tells us that we're fearfully and wonderfully made. And if that's true, then that moment when I was 4 years old, staring at that drum set, was more than just the excitement of a kid looking at an instrument. It was a moment where God began to birth something inside of me, right? And it doesn't matter if I'm ever known. It doesn't matter if I don't ever make a living or, whatever, if I get a drumstick endorsement or something, right? Like, so none of those things are important, but just fulfilling that purpose and that passion that you have. And if what you have is that you're really great at landscaping, then go landscape. I mean, do what you're passionate about, and instead of trying to force something, just do the work. Stop focusing so heavily on the outcome and just do the work.
That's good. I did some content one time about that phrase, if you do what you love, you don't work a day in your life. And I'm like, false. Like,
that's incorrect. Right.
If you do what you love, you work harder at that thing than anything else. And I think what we're talking about here is the passion of the 4-year-old Dell looking at that drum. Like, that's the same passion that's driving you right now in this moment. It's no different. If it's God breathed, it doesn't change because he doesn't change. So it's like, so I totally agree. But Haley, what about you? Anything that you'd tell your younger self the day after that showcase? Just kidding. Any time.
Yeah, man. I like so many things I wish I could have told her, but I just feel like growing up, and I still kind of struggle with feeling like this, and I really do have to work to and pray through it to push past this, but I just always felt like I couldn't ever get to where I wanted to be without other people or the right people or this specific person telling me who I was. Like, and so what that ended up doing was like creating the extreme insecurity in my calling, like in the calling that God had placed in me individually. And it almost became paralyzed as well because I just ended up, I feel like I lived so much of my life just waiting on other people. And so kind of similarly to what Dell's saying, like instead of just feeling empowered that God has given me this calling, this purpose, even outside of that, God has given me his spirit. Like Jesus, like lives inside of me, and he has plans for my life, my future that are good, that are hopeful. Like, and so it doesn't say that this person has to be the one to jumpstart your future or to put you in this position where you need to be. And I think this season that I am in right now, I've never felt more, not in an arrogant way, but just I've never felt more empowered to live out what God has told me to do. Like resources are a real thing, and there are some things that can hold you back in one way or another, but outside of those few, real specific things, like there's really nothing that can hold you back. Like, and I feel like I just lived so much of my life of like making excuses of why I couldn't move forward because like the right person wasn't on board, or I didn't have this and I didn't have that. And like, it's just like, I feel like there's always a solution to whatever problem. And it's only come because we have faced so many bumps in the road. Yeah. That's a huge thing too. It's like without all the no's, without all of the like roadblocks and the, like we put a clip of a song out on social media a few months ago, like, and it says like, what if all the doors slammed shut and all the roads got blocked so that God can make a way? Like learning how to move forward past the disappointment, past the like, and even in life, like we have written so many songs about this because the longer you go through life, the more you realize like, hold on, life isn't just this fairy tale. Like just because you pray for something doesn't mean that you're always going to get it. And then what? Like, are you still going to trust God, or does that mean that God isn't real to you? Like, what are you going to choose in that moment? And so learning how to trust the Lord despite getting what we want and moving forward and seeing that he blesses hard work. Like he blesses work ethic and sometimes I think he allows us to work so hard at something so that we know like how much we want it, and so that we appreciate it like when we do get it, Yeah, I don't know, that's kind of a lot, but like I wish I wouldn't have let other people or excuses hold me back, because like we have the power of God, like
that's really, really good. And I think that's something that I remember even when I started going to like the Nashville scene, the music industry and stuff. And it was like, well, I guess I'm not a songwriter unless I have a pub deal, or I'm not an artist unless I have a record deal, or I'm not a producer unless I've got these credits, or you know what I mean? Like, and it's no one's fault. I mean, it's an industry, so there are like benchmarks of the industry in any industry. So it's not that, but like we just need God's validation. And I know that people will be like, "Oh, that sounds nice," but like it's actually true, because if we're doing the thing that we're like really called to, and like people are like, "Well, how do you know?" I'm like, I don't know. Like, what's the difference between calling and passion? I mean, I feel like if your heart starts to race and like you're like obsessing over something and you like really want to do it and it like gives you a lot of life and joy, like why isn't that calling? Like, physical reaction about something makes us, I just feel like God has to put that in us, because some people, like Dell said, like, you can get pumped about cutting grass, and that's amazing, but like, I like cooking food, and like that makes me happy, or music, whatever. Like, there those things that stoke our passion. I have to feel like that's from God, baked into our DNA. So like, we don't need anyone to tell, because I think a lot of it is like, we make excuses because we don't want to deal with it if it doesn't go the way that we hope. So we just don't try, or we say it's like, oh, well, I'm not good enough to get a pub deal, so obviously, like, I'm not really a songwriter. It's like, heck no, man, you're a songwriter if you write songs. Like, do that.
Yes.
And like what you guys are doing, like, you're putting content out. No one's telling you have to. I mean, we know we should do that, but like, you have 10,000 followers on Instagram, which, congratulations, by the way, because that's a huge deal. 10,000 people that have wanted to be a part of this journey. And the algorithm will see that and will start to expand that reach the more and more you put stuff out. But like, you did that on your own by God's guiding and leading, and all those songs that you have so much content, and you can experiment with, like, all right, well, they love that rock vibe, let's try another one and see how that goes, and just slightly adjusting how you're rolling out and pairing content with your actual songs. So I love that, and I'm glad. I mean, literally, like, we're sitting here because of that, because we met on Instagram through the algorithm. So I mean, it's a real thing, people. So with that, like, I want to build that 10K as much as we can through this platform. So let people know the best way to connect with you guys and how to find you.
Instagram is Natural State Music Official. So yes, like, we would love for you to follow along, like, comment, share. All of that is just super encouraging. And then also just like, it's out the message of these songs to people that we wrote them for. We are on TikTok as well. This is the one Natural State. And then streaming too. We do have music out while you're waiting for new music. We do have music out on all the streaming sites.
All the streaming.
Well, thanks for being here. Before we go, I want to pray. I always like to close in prayer. So let me pray for you guys.
Love it.
God, thank you so much for Haley and Dell, and for Matt, and for the whole Natural State crew. God, we're just excited for how you are leading them and guiding them, God. And I just love that they are truthfully and truly just chasing after where you're taking them. And it comes through, like we talked about, that wisdom of knowing what it looks like to kind of chase after our own ideas, or even if we don't even realize that's happening, we're just chasing after the thing that we think is the thing, God. But we just pray that their eyes and hearts continue to be enlightened to see exactly where you're leading them, because we know that when we're on the path that you've laid before us, those doors, you just rip the doors right off, God. And it doesn't make sense. And sometimes it feels awkwardly easy that we find ourselves in cool situations, God, but let us always give credit where credit's due. And that's your doing, God, because we know when we align our steps with yours, we find ourselves where you want us to be. And ultimately that's where we want to be too, God. So we just pray that they continue to walk that walk with you, and God, and that you'll highlight the exact songs that you want them to get out in this next season, God, to reach the people that you've called them to reach through their unique voice in this group together, God. We're excited to see that and give them inspiration and give them extra energy, because we know it takes a lot of work to do this stuff, God. So we thank you for that, and we just can't wait to see and hear the testimonies that come through the music that these guys are putting together. In your name we pray, amen.